Thanks everybody for joining this online salon. I'm so happy to see many familiar faces as well as new faces, and I'm looking forward to a great exchange with all of you. This salon is organized by the Beck Dynamics Integral Foundation, and this is the second salon we organize, and we will be doing this on a regular basis to discuss social and political situations in the world and to deepen our understanding of what's happening, as well as other areas of application of spiral dynamics. But today specifically, of course, will be about the application of spiral dynamics and integral thinking onto the situation of what's happening in Europe regarding the war with Russia, between Russia and Ukraine. I'm your host. My name is Auke van Nimwegen. I come from the Netherlands. I organize this with two of my colleagues, Raza and John, and Raza from Ukraine and John from the UK. And of course, our speaker, I will introduce him in more detail later, will be Valerii today. Good. Okay, so what we will do is tonight is I actually start with a very short introduction about the situation in Ukraine, as much as I can do that as a Dutch person, and I'm sure that Valerii will add a lot to that as well in his presentation. But just to set a clear sort of common understanding of what the people in Ukraine are dealing with, and then Valerii will present for about 45 or 50 minutes. After that, we have some time to go into breakout groups where we have some questions for you, and then we come back at half an hour later to reflect on those questions. And also, there's more opportunity there for Q&A. Also, ask Valerii questions or make comments and so on. Okay. As we've said in the invitation, we are expecting everybody to understand spiral dynamics here in this setting. You don't have to have a very in-depth understanding, but of course, it's good that you know a little bit about the different value systems. Okay, good. Okay, I'm going to share some slides to talk about, because I think before Valerii goes into his analysis, I think it's good to understand what's happening in Ukraine, and I'm not sure that everybody, given the different feeds on social media that all of us have, and the fact that currently the situation in the Middle East is much more relevant, or much more in the news. That's not more relevant, but much more in the news. If I look at it from my perspective here in the Netherlands, I see that a lot of material about Ukraine has gone a little bit into the background. And while at this moment in Ukraine, the situation is increasingly intensifying, and I think it's good for us to understand, what from a Ukrainian perspective, what I know that people are fighting for, and that is obviously they are fighting for the sovereignty of their state. The Ukrainian state was established in 1991 with, by the way, agreement with, of course, with the Russian Federation and other states, and so the Ukrainians are fighting to maintain that, but they're also fighting to maintain their distinct culture, because there's a strong attempt happening to wipe out that Ukrainian culture. And one of the things also to understand at the moment, which I haven't put in a slide here, but that Valerii reminded us, and I'm sure he will add to what I'm saying later. But at the moment, there's on the battlefield, there's pretty much a stalemate. So Russian has conquered some of the areas of Ukraine in 2022. But since then, they've been pushed back, and they've hardly gained any ground. and Ukraine has been very successful in destroying a lot of the Russian military force. Just recently, they destroyed about 30% of the long distance bombers, and there's endless stories, and Valerie knows a lot more about that, about what Ukraine has been able to do to deter the enemy. And so we see that the objectives that Russia has, they're not being met at the moment. They're far from meeting the idea where they could just roll into Ukraine. They haven't taken any major cities. And so that's the situation on the battlefield. But this war is not just fought on the battlefield, right? So one of the things that I see a lot in my social media feed, because I'm somehow, of course, that is where my interest area also is that there is an increasing attack on civilian targets in Ukraine. And I think that is something that many of us don't really see so much. But it's recently, the last weeks, it's increased. I sort of looked up some of the statistics. There's an estimate between 120,000 and 200,000 civilian sites targeted, and that's just not on the. And you may think that that's near the front line, but this is all over Ukraine. Also in the east of Ukraine, cities are attacked, and these are attacks specifically on civilians, specifically on schools and hospitals and other civilian sites. And so that's good to realize, because there seems to be very little outcry in well, I would say the West, in Europe and US about that. We have a lot of outcry over what's happening in Gaza, but very little at the moment over what's happening in Ukraine. And if we look at the casualty numbers and all that, it's quite high. And this is, of course, something that the Ukrainians have to live with every day. So now, the other thing that I wanted to put into perspective, there's a narrative of, let's just have peace talks and stop the fighting, and let's have a ceasefire. And obviously, that's nobody can be against the ceasefire, and nobody can be against negotiations if they are if they achieve something. But we have to realize that if the fighting stops right now, the suffering in Ukraine doesn't stop. So maybe the attacks on civilian targets stop, but there's an estimate of hundreds of thousands of children that have been kidnapped from the occupied areas in Ukraine. Ukrainian children that have been kidnapped and taken to Russia, forced to be adopted by Russians or put in education camps. And this we may have the impression that these are just orphan children or so, but that's not the case. Actually, the Russians, they have these filtration camps in which they take children away from their parents and send the children to Russia and so on. And obviously, also, if we look at the next slide here, there's the adults, of course, are also targeted in the occupied areas. There are many torture and detention centers. Thousands of people are being kept there and have been tortured and are being tortured. And this has been going on, for a long time in Crimea since 2014. There are filtration camps. So if you show any affinity with the Ukrainian culture, you're seen as an enemy. And this is an attempt to wipe out Ukrainian culture. So this is you could say, an attempt to genocide, right? There's mass graves, and we see bits and pieces of that in the news. But if you look at the statistics, you look at the numbers, it is quite extreme. And again, it is going on every day. So if there is a ceasefire, this doesn't stop, right? There's also if you look at the prisoners of war, how they are treated, the Ukrainian prisoners of war, how they are treated in Russia, it is very much in violation with the Geneva Convention. and they're denied medical care. They now you can see on the photo here, how they come back. They're often starved, tortured, in all sorts of ways. So I think this is good to realize that it's awful to see these things, but it's good to keep this into our minds when we try to find a solution for that situation. We don't just want the frontline fighting to stop. We want, of course, the Russians to stop erasing the culture and of Ukraine. And this is something that is not new for Ukrainians. They, under the Tsars already, they were, Ukrainian language was and books were banned. They were targeted for prosecution. Of course, we had the 1930s, Holodomor, the Great Purge. I'm not going to list all, talk about all these items here on the slide, but there's been a consistent effort over the last 200 years by Russians to try to erase Ukraine and Ukrainian culture. So this is also important to keep that into mind, that of course this is something that Ukrainians are very aware of, and they realize that what's happening here is a very systemic attack on a people and on the culture. So I just wanted us to take this into account as we were going to listen to how Valerii currently analyzes the situation, and looking at the politics and looking at economics and other things. Good. So, sorry, I can't hear you. Okay, good. I'm suggesting that during the presentation of Valerii, we would hold questions. You can post them in the chat, and then Valerii can see whether he can respond to that or not, and otherwise we will take them on later in the Q&A. So now I know many of you know Valerii well, but still I will, of course, for those that don't, introduce him. When I first met Valerii about 3 years ago now, when I first actually met him online, I was quite impressed with the level of depth he had in his integral and spiral analysis of what was happening there. And he is an entrepreneur, Ukrainian entrepreneur, but he's also a lecturer, and he's specialized in systemic change, leadership, and social transformation. He's the co-founder of the Nova Krenia Civic Platform, and he teaches in the Kiev Mohyla Business School. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Another important part is that there is a group of intellectuals from Ukraine, which includes Valerii, have created a Sustainable Peace Manifesto, which I think is a very important document to understand what is necessary to end the violence and to restore justice and democracy. I will post a link to that in the chat later for those of you that haven't seen that. And so Valerii is a co-author of that. He's done lots of writing. He also writes for the Eastern European news site. And one of the things that I've noticed over the years, Valerii and I have met quite a few times in the last years, and he, what strikes me is just his relentless energy to bring clarity to what is happening, to fight for democracy. And it in the 80s, I spent a lot of time in Poland, and I also had friends that were part of Solidarność. And at that time, there were a group of Polish thought leaders, intellectuals, that were very instrumental in the transition from the autocracy of Poland to a democracy, what happened in the late 80s, early 90s. And I often have to think about, Valerii having a similar important role Not so much, of course, in the change to democracy, because that is something that has already happened in Ukraine, but in finding a way out of this situation and finding a way forward that really creates sustainable peace in the region. I think we rely Ukraine will rely a lot on people like Valerii in that process. So, Valerii, that's my introduction to you, and let's leave the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Auke. Hello, everybody. I have a great honor and pleasure to deliver my vision of the war and peace in Europe. I will not say something about, I will say nothing about realities of war. I think this is not my topic tonight or today. I would like rather to try to show you the global model and how this model is applying in Ukraine right now, and what are our local and global consequences, and what is our local and global job, which which we could take as a responsibility for the better world. So let's start with our integral analysis of war and peace in Europe. And first, let's consider, I will very briefly consider a model of phase transitions, which indeed definitely know. So as far as everybody here knows about integral model of social and political and economic and mental development and so on. So you know that we see our social development as waves, you know, these colors, as waves which are rolling over each other, and all the time new wave comes and nothing disappears. So that means that diversity increases. So many different worldviews coexist now, not only in our mental sphere, but also in our political life, economic life, and so on. So all the previous waves are in the depths and are at some places on the planet. So that means that really we are living in very different epochs. And now I would like to show you this social development of humankind just at one slide. So imagine the humankind emerged after cognitive revolution. Some scholars think it was some 70,000 years ago, as the emergence of a modern human brain, modern human conscience with language, culture, and complicated social skills, and the next fast transition during Neolithic revolution, where agriculture appeared some 12,000 years ago approximately. And agriculture means property, property means social stratification, property means cities to defend, states to defend, social stratifications means heroes, to let people religious and so on. So the emergence of organization. And the next one is so-called actual time, some 2,500 years ago, when ethics and morality and codified law and philosophy and strategy and literature appeared. And then, you know, we know modernization with its scientific, technological, industrial revolutions and so on, which started some 500 years ago. And now we are in the current transition. So all the human history at one slide, but how this transition really really happens. Transition happens through crisis. So at every step, humanity puts pressure on the resources. It is like that. So humankind is growing, and then crashes on the development ceiling. So we have two options: go out through new mentality, through new conscience, or go down. So when we are approaching this development ceiling, we see horsemen of the apocalypse: famine, state collapse, migration, disease, climate change, all those things which we have now. But that means, since we have this clash on the ceiling of development and two ways, way up and way down, that means that the story which I show you on this slide is just a half true. This is not the full truth. This is not the full truth because this is the survivorship bias. So you know that those people who were met dolphins in the sea, they told us that dolphins push them towards seashore. But this is the story which is told by the people who were pushed by dolphins to the land. And those people who were pushed by dolphins to the open sea, they told us nothing. This is a survivorship bias. So this good story, this good slide is a half true. This is a story of victors. This is the story, the history written by people who really made all these successful transitions. But what about people who failed to do these transitions? Successful attempts we call phase transition, but we have a lot of different phase disasters. So way up through the ceiling we call phase transition, and way down we call phase disaster. And the falling down of Roman Empire is just one very famous example, but around in the beginning of 17th century, we saw two different ways of two different major civilizations. The more populated and richer and more wise for that moment, Chinese civilization goes down, and smaller, poorer, and technologically retarded Europe goes up through Newton science and then industrial, scientific, and other revolutions. So that means that there are different ways from that bifurcation point. We should not be biased on as survivors. This is a story which is the story of victories, but every step for every one phase transition, successful transition step up, we have several steps down, have several phase disasters. And then those who managed to go next step up, they have a rent of development. So they colonized people from previous stage of development. They exploited their resources. They took their land and so on. So every time we have people who conquered the world, and then we know that story of European conquer when Europe made successful phase transition several hundred years ago. It colonized the whole world, and from our point of view of modern people of 21st century, that was not was good because this is colonization, slavery, and so on. And then maybe we'll be in the next one. So I call this the law of the slippery slope. So human history has no end. Best regards to Francis Fukuyama. So civilization has no lasting achievements, and we as people who know what spiral dynamics is, we know the reason, the major cause. Because the world problems repeat themselves again and again, each time with a new value, because we all start with Besh. Every generation, again and again, starts from zero, starts from scratch, and then goes up. And it is easy. It is easy to imagine how next generation could go further than their fathers, and or so could overcome them, could overrun them, or maybe not reach the same level. If a next generation could not reach the same level, it looks like degradation of the civilization. So if we fail to make a breakthrough, then we slow down, slide down, slide down. And simple solutions here don't work. But coming back to the colonization, slavery, exploitation, and competition, and so on. So first of all, civilizations compete, societies compete, and competition and cooperation are rooted not just in biology but maybe in mathematics, because in all competition cooperation games, best strategies are not to trust to everybody, not to trust to nobody, but to divide people on us and ours. So friends and strangers, and by arbitrary criteria, maybe by whatever. and to use this division-based strategy. So indeed, our circles of solidarity grow, thanking to great teachers and philosophers, but still work. And those societies who are leaders of the big race, they enjoy the rent of development. So rent of development, this is exactly what Europe and America and Australia, so all this so-called Western world enjoys. Why? Because that's just the hypothesis of Scottish historian Neil Ferguson. Because this breakthrough to orange brought brought us several so-called killer applications. There's a term of Ferguson, like free competition, like science, like property rights protection, medicine, consumption as a basis of industrial development, and work ethics. So this creates a very vibrant world of the modern Western civilization in Europe, America, and other countries of the Western civilization, which allowed them to overrun practically all other societies and to enjoy rent of development, which creates a specific status quo: global North and global South. Chinese politicians never use expression global south. They rather use global majority. And they say there's 1 billion people of former colonizers and former slave masters under the American flag, and there are 7 billion people, former slaves and colonized people, under flag of China. Indeed, this is a Chinese way of thinking, but being a part of global majority provides you with certain how to say certain moral rank, as well as being a part of the former enslaved. But the status quo is not eternal. So the laggards are catching up, and China is now catching up America and Europe. So we had a long period when global North, Euro-Atlantic civilization, reached the status quo of rent of development, and now this period is over. As Marco Rubio, Secretary of the State, said, the post-war global order is not just obsolete, it is now a weapon being used against us. So now everybody would like to destroy status quo. Americans would like to destroy status quo because this doesn't provide them with the rent of development anymore. And Chinese would like to destroy the status quo. So just take a look to the world GDP in 1995 and 2020. Once more, now focus on America. America is the same. Now focus on China. China is much bigger. Now focus on Europe. Europe is practically the same, a little bit squeezed, a little bit smaller because of growth of China. And now you can focus on whatever you want and see that the real balance has changed dramatically. What does it mean? That means that the Western world could not enjoy rent of development anymore. And then at the same time, we have a face disaster at our horizon. We as a planet are running out of resources, and our social, political, and other systems are not keeping up. So imagine pace of change, and imagine the line, more or less line, or plain line of human adaptability and exponential line of technology development. So indeed, these two lines, these two curves will cross at a point, and after that point, we shouldn't be able to adopt. Bad news is that we are already after that point. So we already are living in a borrowed time, as Thomas Bjorkman said. So what does it mean? That means that horsemen of apocalypse are already here. Indeed, you could not imagine big wars in modern world if there would be no such an important part of oil and other fossils like that in energy balance of the humankind. So oil empires are pumping in by money and then started aggressive wars. The same about coronavirus. You know the story about tropical forests. The same about wars. So all those stories about climate change, wars, pandemic, all are the stories of phase barrier and the the bifurcation point between phase transition, successful transition, and phase disaster. So that was a abstract model, but now let's take a look how it works in the real world. Now we should zoom in to some local things, and I would like to beg my pardon to my American friends and to all American audience of this meeting, because I will say some bad words about American policy of the present American administration. Sorry. So what we see long trends which led us to brokenism because loss of trust and hatred of institutions and the establishment, which are arrogant and maybe corrupt, not only in America, in many countries, but we're speaking about America now. Protest against cultural changes of the postmodern agenda. You know that idea of Ken Wilber's book, Trump and Post-Truth World, which explains Trump election coming of Trump as a anti-green revolution, but also pressure of technological changes, which lead to losses of jobs, and American dream is not a reference point anymore. Some other jobs are going to Asia, and people would like to bring back those jobs to America by anti-globalism. And some people think that America pays so much money to international institutions and let revert this money to American taxpayers, and Americans sometimes feel that they work more than Europeans and Canadians and Australians, but the quality of life, any indicator of quality of life starting was life expectancy and whatever, education, public health, criminal situation, and so on, is worse in America. So some Americans think that Europeans simply steal money from America by not well balanced trade and lack of European contribution to European security, which is paid by Americans. And indeed, growing influence of large corporation and changed attitude towards science. So people who believe in plain Earth and people who believe in the globe Earth, maybe these numbers will be equal very, very soon. So all these trends led many Americans, not everybody, but many Americans, to the idea of brokenism, to broken this unjust social order, which where they lose jobs and their money goes to whatever, United Nations, Europe, whatever. But if we shall look into the United States administration, we shall see very different forces which have influence on the politics. Some economic nationalists, which would like to create more capable American state and more capable American economics, and some techno-fascists, they would like to establish their own corporate system of governance, and some new crusaders, which would like to establish the kingdom of God right here and right now, and some other cohorts which have not such great influence. So different forces, different social groups, they want absolutely different, they crave for different scenarios of the future. What they unites them is just brokenism, the idea to break the rule, the unjust social order. And indeed, we have a change in American policy as a result of these trends, not as a result of eccentric personality of Donald Trump. But as a result of those long trends which form American policy, now we see rule of force in world in international politics instead of rules and agreements, and no alliances, and security contracts no longer work, as J.D. Vance told at München Security Conference to Europeans. And American European Union is exhausted, which is the point where Russia, China, and America now work together, because to disconnect Europe and America, it was the biggest dream and the major goal of Chinese foreign policy for decades. Now this is done. Why it is necessary to make Europe only a market, not a center of power? Because in the world of rule of force, the less centers of power are, the better is. And the opponent of America is China, which brings America and Russia into embrace. Again, not to eccentric character of some political persons, but because of long trends, because of a desire of every American administration, both Republican or Democrat, to reset relations, because of the reverse Nixon operation to detach Russia from China, as Nixon detached China from Soviet Union. But this is not possible because Russia already is a satellite of China in many aspects. And transactional approach, craving for resources, earth-rich materials, oil, and so on and so on. Indeed, Russia is a battering ram for destruction of the old order, and the idea of weakening of Europe, as I said, it is not just American and Chinese idea, but also Russian idea. And Russia looks for many conservative Americans as a defender of traditional values, which oppose this postmodern agenda. And indeed, there are Western mistakes of Russian studies. Nobody will say that mistaken for many years. So, and then if we should look into the real reasons of the war, how the war became possible, we should see imperialism, because all empires cease to exist but one, authoritarianism, absence of free election, free media, and so on, archaization, like that, cult of war, cult of violence, cult of death, and oil and gas. Indeed, as I said, a failure of intellectuals in Russia. Unfortunately, Russian intellectuals who failed to offer to their nation the picture of the future. So the only the picture of the past is to be restored. And global spread of imperial influence, indeed, and one desire of business as usual, and failure of international organizations like NATO and UN, and post-truth, and failure of many world intellectuals, which lost moral compass, and failed to answer hard questions. Uh, so very both leftists and rightists failed to name the realities of life. So the whole country could go backward. Because Ukraine is fighting for its future, for its dream of the future, how Ukraine sees itself on the future. Indeed, Ukraine is not like that for the moment. It is just a dream, but Russia is fighting for the past. So this is a chrono war. This is a typical war on the barrier on the phase transition. And how this integral degradation was possible in all spheres. In economics, from blue oligarch model of power balance to red despotic hyper centralized system. In politics, from blue non-liberal democracy to red autocratic empire. In religion, from blue Christian orthodoxy to heretic promotion of superiority. The photo made by BBC shows the ritual ceremony with nuclear warheads. So that means that we underestimate and don't understand the red, because we could not imagine that red doesn't think about long-term consequences and consider politeness as weakness, and never remembers lesson of the past, never negotiates, and understands only immediate results. And our European and American modern green fails because green understands conflict as a conflict of two evils. Conflict of two evils means no matter who wins, who loses, start a dialogue, us up, and we don't care who is raped and who is raped, who is raper and who is raped, just reconcile. So green is really lost in the face of red aggression, which we see in many countries across the world. So sincerely advocating for peace and harmony, green often nurtures this and could answer just with peace mantra and habit of powerlessness. What we need is green flourishing instead of green failure. So we need to replace unhealthy green by healthy green, which indeed is lives in the deep of our heart, but needs also red strength, blue moral compass, orange rationality, and creativeness. So healthy green, which we could observe now in many countries across the world, including Ukraine, is resilient, decentralized, anti-fragile, and we need also healthy red. We could not simply throw the red away because red could serve life and resonate with us, and we need healthy red to oppose unhealthy red. So there are many, many examples of this iconic green flourishing. And now let's make some conclusions. So what we have here, we have the global disease. And everywhere I analyzed the situation of the Russian-Ukrainian war, but you can take any other war and see the same. The global disease, which has lost the integrity and health. Because our unhealthy green concentrates on his or her feelings, rejects everyone else, and has not coped with the role of the avant-garde. Again, instead of all quadrants, all levels, this unhealthy green is living just in one quadrant, one level. Upper left and green. Nothing else. Nothing else. And at the same time, unhealthy orange increases inequality, craves money and power, and even dreams of immortality. And at the same time, unhealthy blue reduces our solidarity cycles and fears and suppresses any change. And at the same time, unhealthy red craves personal power, and unhealthy purple believes in conspiracy theories and any kind of anti-scientific nonsense. This is the diagnosis of our life. This is the sad story where we are. And what we need to build, to rebuild, to cure and integrate this from the very bottom. Healthy purple, which supports communities that won't let us fall. And healthy red, which loves freedom and is ready to resist aggression and to protect his or her world. And healthy blue, which definitely distinguishes between good and evil. And healthy orange, which knows facts, believes in progress, and seeks win-win solutions. And finally, healthy green, which hears everyone and integrates everyone and is open to the world and strives to make it better. I disagree with Ken Wilber's hypothesis that only yellow could solve this problem because, as far as we see in human history, the new level doesn't arise faster than the old grows and fills up and suffers defeat and falling down in the crisis. So we are now on the green threshold, and we are very far from yellow. This is a green challenge for healthy green and for healthy integration. We have a crisis of orange, which the green fails to solve. So we haven't searched for the new, we must cure the old. And also different quadrants of the war, those of us, of you who heard my previous presentation know this integral view on the war. Also, all quadrants needs cure. And then let's apply this. Let's come back again to the local story from the global model and say the practical example of dealing with root causes of the war, how to stop the war. So the question is understanding the all quadrants, all level nature of the war, how to stop the war and ensure sustainable peace. Indeed, you know that all negotiations are very unlikely because Ukrainian red lines and Russian red lines, they fundamentally don't overlap. So who will do all those things to make Russia back country of normal democratic development? Is it possible to do this from outside? Never. Only from inside. But how to do this? Is democracy possible in Russia? Not because since while Russia is an empire, path dependence and absence of institutions and absence of democrats, but presence of imperial resentment and institutions provide could not allow a democratic way of imperial development. Here I would like to uh, remind you the quotation of Nikolai Berdyaev, famous Russian philosopher, which says that from February to October 1917, all possible parties and ideas paraded before the captivated Russian gaze. And what did the Russian man choose? What he had all along the Tsar and the Empire. The same during Putin time. So, what we have? We have a false dichotomy between two different scenarios, which both are bad for Russia, Ukraine, Europe, America, and other countries, but are very good for China. Either imperial consolidation or imperial collapse. Both scenarios brings just suffering and war. But if we have no good scenarios, that means that someone reframes our reality. This is a trap of Moscow centrism, a trap which could not provide us with the good scenarios. This is something famous as a Chicken Kiev speech of 1991. Please Google who don't know the Chicken Kiev speech of American president, one of the worst American presidential speeches in 20th century. So this is a trap of focusing on Moscow only, which could not see some other some good scenarios, some scenarios of balance in power, refederalization, and so on. So this is what we call decolonization, either making Russia Federation back or making this disintegration, not chaotic collapse, but like in 1991. So the major reason for the war is imperialism, colonialism. This is a guilty man. Do you know this man? This is Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, which divided all nations to historical nations and non-historical nations. And historical nations have much more rights, and non-historical nations should be silent. So voice of colonial and post-colonial society is not heard by historical nations. So how to stop the war? Indeed, weapon money essential, but the consent to defeat of Russia is the major issue. But why the West could not agree? Because historical nations like could not be defeated. Who will manage non-historical nations? They are barbarians, probably. Leaders of historical nations could be persecuted and be subject to tribunal. Assets of historical nation cannot be confiscated, and they couldn't be expelled from UN Security Council and cannot be embargoed. So how can we press historical nation? Historical nation has all rights, and non-historical nation should keep silence and give to historical nations what they want. So this is the major trap. This is a major cause of the war and our problem. We still look at all this story through imperial colonial lenses, imperial colonial optics. And now I would like to be a voice of those people living in Russian regions because they have no their own voice. They are not allowed. According to official data, 28% of the population are not ethnic Russian. The real figure is much greater, up to 40%. And also Russian-speaking regions have some strong identities like Far East, Siberia, Ural, and so on. And all those territories and nations and peoples have a long, very similar history of genocides, deportations, cultural oppression, deprivation of lands, violation of human rights, mass murder, artificial famines, and so on and so on. So let these people go. Let my people go to prevent all risks, all crises, and to finally stop to call Moscow the historical nation and all others, stop to call all others barbarians with no rights, and stop to look at the Russia through the colonial imperial optics. So coming back, Europe will not survive without Ukraine, and Ukraine will survive without Europe. Even with if Ukraine if American support will be lifted out. We are in the same boat, not because we love each other, because we either will sail together or drown together. Because if Ukraine will fail, the war very probably will go to Europe next day. If Ukraine will stay, this risk also is very high. So to prevent a global fire, we need to extinguish a local one. How to defeat Russia, how to stop the war and ensure sustainable peace within 3-4 months, it's a very clear story. So Moscow will stop the war only when it will be unable to continue. And indeed, this moment will launch a series of deep political changes in Russia, which will make the next war simply impossible. So, conclusions. We had the global disease, and now we need a global treatment. We need to develop families and communities to encourage people for freedom and readiness to defend, to distinguish between good and evil, true and false, to stick to facts and believe in progress and seek for win-win solutions, and indeed to cultivate empathy, emotional intellect, tolerance, integration, openness, and decrease inequality. It was my intention not to be very concrete at this slide, because it would be your part of job to find your own personal way through this global cure and integration space. All of you are parts of many educational and developmental projects in different parts of the world. But what we need now to make this integral, to make this real, the policy, to make this the policy of all leading nations, and not only in terms of all levels, but also in terms of all quadrants. Big hurt is not enough, sorry. Big hurt is located in the upper left quadrant. It is not enough, it is not integral. We have to cure all quadrants, including educational systems and economic opportunities and free development of cultures and languages and religions, and care about the environment and so on. So we should be really integral. So we must repair the system, not to burn to the ground, as Donald Trump makes when he sees that the system doesn't work. We have only local solutions, but we have to cope global challenges. That means that countries of the West and nations of the Western civilization should develop the global policy to support development in different parts of the world, and to find a balance between stimulating development, which right philosophy offers, and limiting inequality, which left philosophy offers. We don't be afraid to have influence worldwide. And now I will show you the global trends scenario space developed by National Intelligence Council of the United States, but reconstructing their vision. I added some other scenarios I'm sure many of these scenarios which I added were present in the closed part, in the classified part of their full report. What is not all scenarios are available to in the open part of the report, and let us take a look on these bifurcations. So first, can the humankind jump over face barrier? Could we have successful final transition or face disaster? But there is third option. We can delay this solution and pass all the problems to the next generation, but just once. No more, not 2 times. So if yes, who leads? Either the West or China. We should see either renaissance of democracies, democracy will overcome in the West, or triumph of techno-fascism if they overcome. or Chinese worlds, which will not be so lovely for each of us. If disaster, would it be partial or total? Would it be tragedy and mobilization of those who survived, or would it be the total disaster? And then, if both or delay, we are asking ourselves about globalization. Could we keep globalization peaceful or not? This is the very dramatic scenario of a real world war. Or would it be separate silos with different truth, different internet, and different sciences? So the major bifurcation is our phase barrier. Could we repair our system according to integral view? And this is not a philosophical issue. This is a number of very practical things. So we are on a bifurcation point between Enlightenment 2.0 or we invented the word endarkment. You know that Umberto Eco spoke about new Middle Age, but endarkment is a much better term. And so how to make a difference between enlightenment and endarkment? Enlightenment thinks that the present is an imperfect future and we should work together to make future much better than now. Endarkment promoters think that present is a corrupt past. We should work together to repair the past and to bring back the past to the reality. All those things are about increasing complexity or decreasing complexity and increasing simplicity. We can call this the full-scale future fear. So humankind is really afraid of the future. This is not just a future shock described by Alvin Toffler. This is the full-scale future fear. So make something great again in many, many countries means that people vote for the past and the future never comes. But if we go to the past, we should meet all dragons and all vampires of the past. We should meet there the World War, as I recommend you the absolutely brilliant novel of Bulgarian writer Georgy Gospodinov, which has won the Pulitzer, not Pulitzer, the Booker Prize, the so-called Time Shelter Roman. This is the best the best novel about what we have now in the world, and we have the global future fear. And the role of leaders is to show the way and to give hope. Now, this is our role, and sorry, we collectively fail to do this. So contours of a new system are being outlined right now, and there are no other adults in this sandbox except of us. Thank you so much. And please forgive me my very, very poor English.
Thank you very much, Valerii. And I think a lot of what you said has come and created deep impressions on us. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create breakout rooms with 3 people in them. And there you get also a chance to sort of give your first response. In the chat, I'm putting 3 questions for you to work with. What do you think is most important regarding what you just heard? And how does this affect your view of how to achieve sustainable peace in Europe? And for those that live in America, you can, of course, include America in that as well. And the third one is, what can you do, considering all quadrants? And so what we'll do is, as you are 3 people in the breakout room, we will each give you 8 minutes to contemplate on this. The invitation is to let people speak, so maybe something that you hear triggers something in you that you want to say, but then save that for your own space so that the 8 minutes people really get the space to express themselves, and also to invite you to deeper listening and just not back and forth responding. Okay. We will give you a time signal after 8 minutes. So and John is going to create the groups for us now. Okay, John, you want to start the groups? Oh, yeah, and take the 3 questions. Right, it's in the chat. And John, are you there? Can you start a group? And oh yeah, there we go.
Uh, which means that we had no steps towards sustainable peace, neither in Biden time nor in Trump time. But if some American policymakers would like to install sustainable peace in Europe, it is we estimate time to reach sustainable peace something like 4 months, no more. And this is not about kinetic weapons. This is about using of authority and economic and political power and consolidating international players around the idea of sustainable peace.
Thank you.
I have a question. I couldn't find the raise my hand button. Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Michiel.
It is a little bit similar to Rachel's question. There has been a fairly rough waking up in Europe. And my question is, from a Ukrainian perspective, is it really a waking up? Which countries are getting it, except for the Baltic states? They already get it. What else needs to wake up and be done? How do you see Europe changing in regard to the war and Russian aggression?
Thank you so much, Mikhail. From Ukrainian perspective, to protect Europe to protect Europe from security challenges of 21st century, Europe has to be self-sufficient in defense. And which countries are, so we in Ukraine call this coalition of willing, but I don't know whether it is coalition of willing or coalition of those who understand the situation or coalition of those who are brave or whatever. But what we see is that we have already the center of gravity of those forces, of those who can be the foundation of European Security Alliance. This is so-called Joint Expeditionary Forces. This is the very old and sometimes obsolete organization which recently was brought back to life. And this is a coalition led by United Kingdom, where also and where 8 Nordic Baltic countries and the Netherlands also participate. I think this is the center of gravity of European alliance. Then what we have else? We have Germany with great potential, but complicated internal political stories. We have France, even more complicated from many point of view. And we have Poland, which have also internal political battles. And we have countries like Hungary and Slovakia, where current regimes are not so European friendly and are rather European skeptics. And in Hungarian case, even living on Russian money. And we have countries like Spain or Portugal, which are too far to think about that. So I think that maybe when coalition of willing will meet Germany, I think Europe will be in a secure place. But we are, to be frank, far from this point. But Ukrainians are well know whom they are should be grateful for the primarily to those countries who provide them the major part of support in terms of ratio to their GDP or to ratio to their population. You can take any of that, which are Nordic Baltic. So I'm speaking about Norway. I'm speaking about Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, and also the Netherlands. Because if you have, let's say, $1,000 and you give 10, okay, that's brave. Thank you very much. But if you have 15 and give 9, this is much more, how to say, this is much, this is much more noble, let's say.
Yeah. And it shows a position of support, right? Yeah.
And this shows understanding that we are protecting something common.
Yeah.
And our European common space, and not only our European common values, but our European common space. Because it is, taking a look on the map, it is easy to understand that the distance between Black Sea and Baltic Sea is not so big.
Thank you. Okay, John, please.
Valerii, there was so much in your presentation which I thought was brilliant and very original in relation to how a lot of the spiral conversations have taken place, and I really appreciate that. I was wondering whether you think it would ever have been realistic, or whether it would be realistic now for Europe to impose a no-fly zone.
I think, thank you very much, John, for your warm words and for your question. I think that the narrative of no-fly zone is a little bit obsolete because Russian aviation could not operate in Ukrainian airspace. So what we have now, we have rather long range air strike, missile strikes, ballistic strikes than air operations. So there is no Russian airplanes in Ukrainian airspace. So Russian strategic bombers launch their missiles from the deep of Russian territory. So they fly over their own territory and use long-range equipment. So if I would speak to European policymakers and they will ask me what is one single thing which is necessary to do, this is not about weapon. This is about closing Baltic Sea for Russian oil export, and it would be enough. And this is very important not only for Ukraine, which fights the war, but for Baltic countries, for all Nordic Baltic countries, because these old Russian tankers, wherever would be the flag which they use to deliver oil, provides not only money to Russian waging a war, but creates enormous ecological risks for Baltic Sea. Sorry, Baltic Sea is one for all of you. For Poland and Denmark and Estonia, it is the one common space which imagine a huge oil catastrophe in the Baltic Sea. it will be a tragedy for all living beings, for all humans, and for all living in the sea or on the shore. So, and this is very probable because they use obsolete equipment. They use very old and poorly repaired equipment. And for me, it's just an issue of time when this huge catastrophe will happen. And it is not enough to have initiatives just of Denmark to close the Baltic Sea. It is necessary to cooperate within all the community of these countries. And someone should take leadership about that. And so this is the best way to prevent to stop the war even without specific weaponry.
Thank you. Kate, please.
Thank you so much, Valerie, for your talk. Wonderful to hear you as ever. Following on from your question, from what you've just said there about the Baltic Sea, I wondered if you could speak a little about what you, or whether you feel that actions within the Black Sea will have an impact, or what kind of impact there may be around the Black Sea. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. It's very nice to see you again. And what I can say about Black Sea. So the idea of a Russian invasion to Crimea was to dominate on Black Sea, to be the force which is greater than Turkey, and to project Russian power on countries on the western shore of Black Sea, like Bulgaria, Romania, and even Greece. And but what was in reality, Ukraine having no fleet, because Ukraine practically has no fleet because Russia, when invaded Crimea, confiscated few ships which Ukraine had after Soviet Union disappeared. So having no own fleet, Ukraine just using Ukrainian own weapons destroyed half of Russian Black Sea fleet and push another half of fleet to a distant base, where they live now, and are afraid to leave this base, being under Ukrainian attack. This was Ukrainian so-called Neptune missiles, intership missiles, and Ukrainian sea drones, so-called sea babies. So what we have now we have free navigation on the Black Sea, which means free delivery of Ukrainian grain and other goods to customers, which prevents weaponizing Ukrainian grain by Russia, because weaponizing Ukrainian grain, preventing navigation in Black Sea, or controlling navigation in Black Sea, Russia could have great influence on countries of Northern Africa, which depend on Ukrainian food. These plans failed, and but this is the good part of the story. So free navigations and prevention of big famine in Africa is a good part of the story, but there is a bad part of the story. It's a story about Crimea. So Russian forces are transforming Crimea into a moon landscape. So one of the best orchards on the planet is transforming now by pumping out the water into the moon landscape, but because the Russian forces are transforming Crimea into the huge military base, which threatens not only to Black Sea region countries, but taking into account long distance weapons and nuclear power projecting from Crimea practically to all southern and central Europe. So Italy, Austria, they are now reachable from Crimea. And indeed, this is a very sad story about Crimean Tatars, about Crimean indigenous people, which were deported and genocided in 1944. And again, they are now being deported, murdered, tortured, and expelled, and their language and religion and culture are banned, and so on. So that's the most, maybe the most rich in cultural terms, and the most peaceful and well European Muslim nation, which are Crimeans, is practically now under threat of ceasing to exist. Indeed, there are a lot of them. There are hundreds of thousands, but using this policy of genocide several times during 1 century, it is really hard to survive.
Okay, thank you. So last commenter question, Ole, please.
Thank you for your great perspectives, Valerii. I got a little concerned when you talked about the Baltic Sea and stopping the tankers, oil tankers of Russia through the Baltic Sea. And what I'm concerned about is, of course, that all the countries except for Russia around the Baltic Sea is NATO countries, whereas in the Black Sea you're able to operate as a warfaring country and have a direct conflict with Russia, which is kind of what Russia will think is okay, even though they don't think it's okay, of course. They want to operate there. But operating in the Baltic Sea and stopping Russian tankers there will be a move of NATO, I believe. That will be seen as from Russia. And how do you see that potential conflict?
I think we should not transform this into military operation. Just ask all Russian tankers to show ecological insurance policy, and they will so according to international rules, and what will be enough, because technical characteristics of all these old and repair tankers means that if Denmark will and Sweden together will ask for to show the insurance policy for ecological risks, this will be unbearable for these tankers, and they simply could not do this. This is not the issue number one. The second, they you don't use a Russian flag. So there are tankers under very different flags, and you are not obliged to know that they belong to Russia. If they use Greek or Panama or whatever, just ask them about ecological insurance policy according to their real technical state of their ships. And that will be enough to prevent ecological catastrophes. And that will be enough. And please be sure that international insurance companies, they will ask insurance rate which is relevant to real ecological risks and the probability of possible disasters on Baltic Sea, and without any military conflict. So without any specific patrols, cruisers, and submarines, and so on. Just ask them to use documents which provide Baltic countries, Baltic basin countries, with due insurance that if there will be a disaster, that the international insurance market will cover Danish and Swedish expenses to eliminate consequences of these disasters. So this is not a military issue. This is a purely political issue.
That's the objective perspective on it, while Russia might have a more subjective perspective.
Yeah.
And just to add one sentence, when you deal with a gangster, you never could show that you are weak. If you show that you are weak, they will continue to press you. So never show that you are afraid. Show that you protect your own rights and your own freedom, not to enter into military conflict, but simply ask, you create a risk for me. According to international maritime law, I have the right to ask you to show you how could I cover my expenses if the disaster will happen. This is not a political conflict. This is a business issue. And you will speak with a Greek or Latin American officers or captains and ask them to show documents. So nothing personal, nothing specific, just business.
Nice view.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think that we could spend more hours exploring, your presentation and all the issues around it. And I also want to honor the time that we've set for today. So thank you again, Valerii, for your time and to come to us and to share again your insights. I think that at least for me, it has really touched me again to see the depth of how you think about this, and it's so enlightening also to hear your perspective from it, because a lot of what we get is Western perspectives that do not understand that to a gangster you shouldn't show weakness, right? So thank you again for everybody here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for staying along also with the breakout groups. We very much appreciate that. We will continue to organize these salons. We have 2 coming up that are more about the application of spiral dynamics. One will be about the application in working in Africa, and the other one the specific topic we will publish. In October, I expect to do a presentation on looking at peace and liberty. Freedom and liberty from the perspective of the different spiral stages and the confusions that I think I see in our Western world around that. So that will be somewhere in October that we have that. And of course, that will also take into account also the Ukrainian war, but also other conflicts that we are seeing in the world. There is a LinkedIn page for the foundation. You can reach us there. So if you want to have any further conversation, please join us there. Very soon on the website, we will have a bit more activity, the SDI Foundation website. We're currently struggling with some performance issues, but that should be solved within a week's time. And then we also will open some discussion forums there for anybody that's interested in connecting with other people that have an understanding of spiral dynamics and an interest into looking into life's issues from both a spiral dynamics and an integral perspective. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you on one of our next meetings.